From resolutions to possible solutions, let's go to Paul Salem, acting president of the Middle East Institute here in Washington, D.C. Paul, before I get to the situation in Idlib, I really want to focus on UN's role here. We have seen negotiations time after time in Geneva. By my count, 8 rounds of negotiations, which by all means seem to have fallen apart. What can the UN really do in the Syrian conflict?
Well, first of all, the UN Security Council has been paralyzed or absent throughout the Syrian conflict. The UN Security Council was active in the case of Libya. There was some agreement at the time between Western countries, Russia and China, but disagreement over Libya led to further disagreement over Syria. So effectively, the UN Security Council, which could have played a much more effective and robust role from the early days of the Syrian conflict, has been absent. What the UN has put forward, or the Secretary General has put forward in various phases, has been to designate a special envoy for Syria to attempt to lead negotiations. The current office holder is Mr. Staffan de Mistura, who has really tried everything to get political negotiations going year in and year out. The fact of the matter is that this conflict is being resolved by military force, by the Assad regime with support from Iran and Russia, and effectively with great loss of life. That is what is proceeding, and the last major step will be the takeover of Idlib, as you mentioned in your report, the last rebel stronghold. Mr. de Mistura is at least calling for talks in Geneva with some of the countries, both Iran, Russia, and Turkey on one side, and some of the Western and Arab countries on the other, to encourage a redrafting of the Syrian constitution. That in itself is not a bad thing, but the Syrian regime, the Syrian state, has never been one that follows a constitution or respects a constitution. It is one that has imposed its will by force. So nobody really takes seriously that any change in the constitution is going to bring about actual political change. This is being resolved by force.
Well, is a political solution really possible in Syria when you have Russia with its concerns, when you have Iran with its concerns, and now Turkey? You've got the Turks also very involved about the situation there. So it seems we have way too many cooks in this kitchen.
No, there has always been the possibility of a political solution. Me and others have met many times with Iranian envoys, and with Russians certainly, and with Turks, and with all the other players. And as the Russians themselves, or the UN envoys, including Mr. de Mistura, can tell you and have witnessed, that in repeated attempts, even between Secretary Kerry and Foreign Minister Lavrov of Russia, who initially backed the Geneva process, there was quite wide regional international agreement on some of the issues, but it really was the Assad regime and President Assad himself who would not negotiate, and that has stymied every effort. And indeed, there has been no political process, and this is being resolved by force. So yes, in theory, there certainly was a political resolution to this. That is not what the Assad regime wanted. It is something they feared from the beginning. And indeed, they are getting their way. They are winning the war, but they're going to be inheriting a shattered country, a shattered economy, winning the war, but it's going to be very difficult to win the peace.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. We've run out of time. Paul Salem, thank you.